My name is Sara Fischer. I am a Jersey girl who now resides in Washington, D.C. with my husband. I am a media correspondent for Axios and a media analyst for CNN. In my spare time, I love to go on really long walks, and usually I wear my ankle weights and my wrist weights to try to get some exercise. Love the fall, and I'm sad that it's soon going to become winter. And I love to talk to smart people like you, Jamie. It's what makes life fun.
On cam ready in 3, 2, 1.
This is Unknown to Known, an on-cam ready presentation. I'm Jamie Maglietta. Today, the ground under the media has officially shifted. I've said this before, but I find myself repeating it often here. As traditional media splinters, now is the time to strategize how you're going to show up online. But doing so means you need to shift and expand all that you do because you won't make huge waves with just a simple tweet or a little TikTok video or the occasional YouTube video. You need to think strategically and become your own media channel. In May of 2025, streaming accounted for 44.8% of all TV viewing, overtaking broadcast plus cable combined for the first time. YouTube alone is now the largest TV network in America by time spent, leading the field for 6 straight months. Back in 2024, Axios had the headline, YouTube TV has more than 8 million subscribers. Meanwhile, podcasting is leading into video pickup. Meanwhile, podcasting is leaning into video, with 1/3 of weekly podcast listeners tuning in on YouTube. So if you're an expert author or leader, this is your cue. This is your sign. However, I do question watching podcasts. I think more people listen than they watch. Regardless, you need to start distributing your content, showing up on camera, and becoming searchable. So start staking out your plot of land on YouTube and build that house because you need to essentially produce your own media channel to show up in the algorithm. Today's guest has been mapping out the transformation of the media in real time. Sara Fischer is Axios' media correspondent and author of Axios Media Trends, a newsletter you definitely need to subscribe to. There's a link to it in the description. What I love about Sara is she's also worked for reliable sources, where I spent my time at CNN before leaving. Sara is an incredible example of going from unknown to known in her niche. Now, before I get to Sara, if you're enjoying this, be sure to subscribe to the channel or follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. Now let me bring in Sara. Hey, Sara, how are you? Thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning. Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. You know, having been on the TV news side with reliable sources way back when, we're talking years and years and years ago before I got there, and then becoming this on-camera reliable source to networks, what did it take to really start showing up on camera and being that prepared reporter that you are?
I think for a long time, I was super focused on doing one thing well, which was just covering the media industry and being scoopy. So that way, when I was brought on camera, I had a lot of confidence in my answers and what I had to say. And I think what's evolved and what's changed is that, and Jamie, you and I have spoken about this, the demand for your time becomes so intense that sometimes you lose track of doing the one thing well, which
Yeah.
means that you can show up consistently. And so that's something I'm trying to push back into. But, advice for people who are trying to make that shift is really become a master in your field, become an expert. And then if you are, the answering of tough questions becomes a lot easier.
And that also means you need to be a reliable source to your sources. So it's a relationship building experience too, I would imagine.
Yes, especially because when you speak to sources, a lot of times they're going to go off record, they're going to go on background. And so you have to be very mindful when you're speaking externally on a podcast or on television to not break that trust, to not accidentally say something on the record that they told you on background or off record, or attribute it to them when it shouldn't be attributed. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, when you're on camera, it can be very easy to lose track. And you have to just be very disciplined and focused and organized to make sure you don't make those mistakes.
So I don't know if I've told you this, but you were inspiring to me because I wanted to be essentially you one day. And there was that shift where I realized I didn't have enough of the background to become the Brian Stelter or the Sara Fischer. I didn't build those reliable sources along the way as a television news producer, but I always admired that you were able to essentially niche yourself so concretely, but also turn your print background into on-camera moments. And that's what was inspiring to me about you specifically. It was hard, essentially, to show up on camera under the pressure of the lights and the camera having come from a print background.
Oh my gosh, Jamie, that's so ironic because here I am, such a mess, and you are so polished and so prepared and so poised on camera right now that I'm thinking, God, I wish I could show up the way that you are showing up right now. So no, I never had that moment where I was like, I can do this. I think for me, it was all about. I used to be in sales, and sales is extremely transactional. You're first of all, it's an individual contributor
Mhm.
role. You are constantly going out into the field and you're taking meetings with people and you're following up and you're trying to turn that into a partnership. It's very similar in reporting. The difference being with reporting, instead of returning an RFP or a proposal for an ad sales flight, you are spitting out an article. And another key difference is there are a lot of people who want to hear about your article, whereas when you're in sales, like publicly, nobody cares about what your advertising agreement looks like. So for me, the transition onto camera was a natural extension of the work I was doing as a reporter, which was a natural extension of the work that I did as a salesperson. I never went into it thinking I'm going to be this sort of on-camera personality. But I will say, when your core focus and goal is just being a good reporter, the on-air opportunities really do complement and enhance that,
Mhm.
because people want to give information to folks who they think have wide distribution. So for me, it's less about doing it because I'm on air or doing it because of the visibility. It's more so doing it because it strengthens what I do day in and day out as a reporter.
And that's a lot of what I talk about here. It's like if you don't show up on camera, it doesn't help you legitimize yourself as an expert these days. It's almost like you have to start producing yourself for the algorithm, for experts that don't have, well, even for news reporters to be seen and consumed and essentially thought as trusted sources. And I wanted your opinion on that. Do you think that we now have to essentially produce for the algorithm to get that notoriety to become reliable?
Yes and no, because it can
Yeah.
backfire if you overexpose yourself or you're not prepared enough. We have a tendency to say yes to so many things, in part because you want to do right by people who are trying to book guests and
Yeah.
produce shows. And you have friends and relationships in this industry, so you want to help them out. But what you end up doing is a disservice to yourself if you are overexposed and um, prepared. So
Mhm.
my advice to folks would be, it is good to put yourself in positions on camera where you're going to be visible,
Mhm.
but don't do it at the expense of you showing up knowledgeable, looking and feeling your best, and being refreshed. One piece of advice that I could give to people is, for me, it's very hard to do anything from home. I go to my office almost every day, and when I'm not in the office, it's because I'm traveling for work. When I show up on camera, it tends to be either in a polished TV studio or on a stage where the lighting and the
Mhm.
camera work is really good. Because for me, my house is sort of a wild card. I
Yeah.
have construction going on in the basement. My neighbors yesterday were super, super loud. And so
Mhm.
I try to minimize what I do from home. That
Mhm.
way, like, I can ensure that the on-camera appearances I do are as polished as they possibly can be. But it's funny, I did a podcast from my office, and it was an environment in which you would expect for the quality of that appearance to be really, really great. And unfortunately, it was raining and overcast. I have one
Mhm.
window to my side. I didn't have a ring light on me at the time. It was 5 p.m. My makeup was smudged off. And I was looking at myself in the camera thinking, oh my goodness, this is bad. Like, this is not the
Mhm.
best I could do. And that was in my office in a professional setting. So I would just say, yes, you do need to do more on camera, but you need to be very, very mindful of, like, where is something being distributed and do I look my best? Because you never know when something goes viral. And if something goes viral and it's not you looking and sounding your best, that is not a service to you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, when you are planning your on-camera moments, and I say this a lot to everyone who's listening here, guys, you're familiar with this. I'm constantly saying you don't want to be showing up without making those initial investments because so many people are trying to do this from home. Like you want to have, as she's saying, the ring light, thinking about your lighting, making sure when you have those on-camera moments, you look and sound your best because you don't want the press to come across you and be like, okay, she's not really ready for this. And that's a really good point to make. Hey guys, I want to break away from this conversation to let you know about Riverside FM. Riverside FM is my content creation studio. And now, as of this recording, I have an affiliate link. There's an affiliate link in the description to this podcast and YouTube show. There's also a discount code. Use my discount code OCR15 to get 15% off your subscription. I also want to let you know about Firmoo. Firmoo is the glasses brand that I now use. See, guys, I use glasses, and when I show up on here, I'm usually wearing contacts. Why? Because I don't like to deal with the glare issue. So I put together a tutorial on how to wear glasses on camera with all the lights. You'll want to check that out, but you'll also want to look at Firmoo. I have a discount and an affiliate link in the description. I love how this is all coming together, guys. If you're listening to this and you have a brand that you think might work with OnCam Ready's mission, please reach out. You can email hello@oncamready.com. We're also looking for guest ideas for 2026, so email hello@oncamready.com. Now back to the conversation. As we're talking, there's a lot of changes going on in the media landscape. We're seeing companies splinter, we're seeing new brands evolve, we're seeing personal brands build. And, I know you've talked about the Megyn Kellys of the world, but it is a good example of Megyn Kelly and the Joe Rogans that these personal brands are essentially becoming the people that others follow versus the brands that people follow, right? It's like they're more inclined to trust individuals than they are call letters or brand letters. So I'm curious to see, like, as you're looking at how everything is shaping, where you see the audience going. Is it more toward people, or do you think brands still have a chance? Like the
Brands
traditional
definitely
media?
brands definitely have a chance. I mean,
Yeah.
the best example I'll give you, when a celebrity's sibling
Mm.
posts on Instagram that the celebrity died, I think people wait to have the confirmation of a large institutional news organization that they know has real news gathering resources, who can confirm a police report or who got in touch with the family spokesperson directly, before assuming it's true. And then you can go to your personalities who will analyze it, but you do rely on the big institutional news gathering operations as your original source of news. And by the way, so do those personalities. Where do you think they get the information that they're talking about? They get it from a lot of times traditional media reporting it out.
Yeah.
And there's a funny fallacy of a lot of people in power who bash traditional media, and yet they cite it and they quote it and they leverage it when the traditional media confirmation benefits them. So traditional media still plays a huge, 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 enormous role. I think a lot of people don't want to admit how large of a role it actually plays.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I had a conversation with former CNN anchor Cara Costello, and she was saying something very similar, but in the lines of she's seeing journalism students because she's over at a university. They want the brands. They're not sitting there saying, "I want to work for Mr. Beast or some influencer." They are saying, "I want to work for the CNNs of the world." So it is, I guess, comforting to know that. But I think it also raises a good point, like for our listeners, if you're thinking about putting out information or leaning into the news, like I'm constantly saying, as a great way to get the press to notice you as an expert, you want to make sure you're sourcing and using good sources because you don't want to be spewing mis or disinformation. It's really hard, and you got to think like a journalist, and Sarah's a good one to follow to really get a better sense of the work and the effort that goes in. So again, remember to check out her newsletter. And Sarah, there's a lot of tips that we could potentially offer people before they are showing up on camera, or how to pitch the media. There's a lot of directions we can go, but to be mindful of our time. When someone is reaching out to you as a guest expert, or they want to be seen as an expert by someone like you for an article, how best is it to go about it? I've had people say, should I email them? I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's a relationship building experience before you just email. But I'm wondering what your take is.
Sometimes, in rare occasions, we will be looking for an expert on something niche, and your email becomes your library. And so you'll just look through your inbox and say, expert, you know,
Mm-hmm.
local broadcast antitrust
Yeah.
and see what pops up. So I don't think sending emails is a bad way, but developing a relationship is a stronger way, especially if you want to cut through the noise. I
Mm-hmm.
think developing your own brand as an expert helps to legitimize your pitch. Sometimes I will get a pitch that somebody's an expert on something, and then I'll Google them. And if I find that they have no real credibility, it obviously means that I'm not going to consider the pitch. I think academia is very, very, very well positioned
Mm-hmm.
to be positioning themselves as experts because they tend to be nonpartisan. They tend to be focused on very niche, specific expertise.
Mm-hmm.
A good example, if I need to do like a business of music story, I know the NYU professor who focuses on the business of music and has been teaching a class there for decades on it. I know they're an authoritative expert and they have a ton of work online that showcases their research, showcases other interviews where they've been cited. So academia is very well positioned. I think the people who are less well positioned are people who have corporate experience and are now trying to turn that into influence. I think that can be very, very challenging unless you do, as you're doing, Jamie, you develop like media channels where you are consistently showing up and proving to the world that you have this experience.
Yeah, it is, and that's a very good point too. Like you kind of need to start thinking like a producer and creating your own media channel so that you show up within the search when producers like myself or Sarah as a journalist are looking for experts. Because one thing I always found, Sarah, was like if someone pitched me and they weren't leaning into the media where they had an opinion or a point of view that was unique and they weren't showing up as, on YouTube as a guest on a TV show, or they didn't have any social media presence, it really made it a hard sell. And I think you really raise a good point about how people need to be showing up and considering that and making their academic background very obvious, because we don't want to have to dig to say, oh, she was a, expert in this, but it's hard to tell from everything online.
Yes, in academia, there is an expected set of qualifications that gets you to where you are, not just a 4-year degree, but also professors who are tenured, going through the process to get tenured by a rigorous organization.
Mm-hmm.
In the professional world, we don't always have those same standards. So, just because you worked at a content company or you worked at this company for 3 years, I don't know that that necessarily says so much about your expertise as it does about the company's hiring practices at the time. So
Yeah.
I don't know how you left the company. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's a tougher sell in terms of convincing me that you're an expert in something. I will say though, once you spend a lot of time with an industry or a company, it is a little bit more convincing. Somebody who's come to me and has said, I've worked at, Sony Pictures for 30 years. That's a person who I trust has really deep institutional knowledge
Mm-hmm.
of the entertainment industry versus somebody who maybe had 2 years background there.
So, if someone is preparing for a television interview, Sarah, and they want to be as polished as you are, what are a few things that you do before you show up on camera?
Well, making sure you like your outfit, that it's steamed, that it's ironed, making sure that you are not assuming parts of your body will not be on camera. So a lot of times people will wear a blazer on top and then like more casual pants and sneakers thinking it's just going to be my top up, and then it's not. If you're, if you are somebody who likes to wear hair and makeup, making sure your hair and makeup is done well, making sure that the lighting is done really nicely. I think one mistake I've made in the past is I've tried to say yes to so many things,
Mm-hmm.
and then I see how the quality comes out at the end and I don't like it. And it's because I didn't have access to my ring light, or I didn't have access to lipstick, or I didn't feel as though the picture crispness was great and I should have cleaned my camera before. And to me, like what I'm learning now is it is better to say no and do fewer things well than to say yes and do a lot of things poorly, because So many things get distributed in all these places that you don't even know where it's going anymore. YouTube and this and all that shows up in search results. It's just not worth it to have the regret hanging over you of, I don't love the way I showed up in that environment.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So at the end of every interview, I always ask everybody, if you had 30 seconds to introduce who you are and tell everybody what you're all about, what would you say? So you want to give it a go and give me a 30-second spiel on who you are?
Love that. And I love how concise it is. My name is Sara Fischer. I am a Jersey girl who now resides in Washington, D.C. with my husband. I am a media correspondent for Axios and a media analyst for CNN. In my spare time, I love to go on really long walks, and usually I wear my ankle weights and my wrist weights to try to get some exercise. I love the fall, and I'm sad that it's soon going to become winter. And I love to talk to smart people like you, Jamie. It's what makes life fun.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And guys, if you're listening, you need to check out everything Sara has going on right now. There's a link in the description to her newsletter. So make sure you check her out and find her on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the things, Twitter, which is X. I have trouble. And thanks so much for being here today. Be sure to check out the other podcast I have, Think Like a Producer, so you can start showing up strategically. See you guys.